She had no idea my aunt was a U.S. Marshal. That's what makes it all so ridiculously hilarious in hindsight. There she stood on the front porch, red-faced, smug, barking into her phone about a hostile woman with a weapon, while the only thing my aunt was holding was a slightly leaky garden hose. Honestly, the most dangerous thing about the whole situation was probably her level of stupidity. The best part? Aunt Marla just kept watering her peonies like nothing was happening. Unbothered, undeterred, utterly calm. That's what happens when someone like Brenda Calloway picks the wrong driveway to stage a meltdown. The whole saga kicked off during my first week staying with Aunt Marla for the summer. She lived in this polished little neighborhood on the outskirts of Dallas, one of those places where all the lawns look cloned and the houses are different shades of beige. I figured I'd be in for a quiet few weeks, slow mornings, iced tea on the porch, maybe the occasional stray dog or male mix-up. Instead, I walked into a full-on turf war. Brenda Calloway was the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac. She wasn't even on the HOA board, but she moved through the neighborhood like she was chairing the United Nations. Clipboard in hand, lips perpetually pursed, and that tight helmet of hair that screamed, "I correct cashiers for sport." First time I saw her, she was glaring at someone's porch wind chimes like they'd personally insulted her grandmother. Aunt Marla had warned me already. "We've got a Brenda," she'd said. "Just don't feed her attention and she usually slithers back into her nest." But, of course, Marla had committed a grave sin the day before I arrived. She'd set up her lawn chair a little too close to the strip of grass that separates the sidewalk from the curb. Scandalous. Apparently a declaration of war in Brenda's book of manufactured rules. I hadn't even unpacked my suitcase before the drama kicked off. As I was hauling my stuff into the guest room, I heard the sharp snap of a phone camera. I turned to see Brenda across the street, holding her phone like she was clocking a speed trap. Marla just kept watering her flowers. "What's happening?" I asked. "You're witnessing an HOA tantrum," Marla replied without looking up. Brenda's voice rang out across the street. "You're in violation of Section 3, Subpoint B of Community Space Use Regulations." Marla tilted her head. "You mean my chair? It's not even touching the sidewalk." "I've taken a photo and logged your address," Brenda declared. "This is being submitted for review." Marla smiled, cool as a lake in January. "Be sure to spell my name right. It's Marla Givens with an M. Might help you get that report processed faster." It didn't stop there. Brenda was like one of those wind-up dolls that keeps walking into the same wall. Every time I stepped outside, she found something new to critique. The color of our garden gnome. The angle of Marla's American flag. The faint aroma of grilled chicken wafting through the air during lunch. I've never seen anyone weaponize boredom so efficiently. By sundown, I half expected her to crawl into the shrubbery and take notes from behind the hydrangeas. And through it all, Marla didn't flinch. She just hummed old blues tunes under her breath, moved her sprinklers around, and occasionally side-eyed Brenda like you might an opossum on your deck. But the real fireworks came the next morning. Marla had invited me outside to help repot some dahlias in the front yard. It was warm, calm, the kind of peaceful morning you wish you could bottle. Then came the screech of tires. Brenda stormed across the street with that fake urgent power walk Karens use when they think they're starring in a made-for-TV drama. Phone already in hand. "You've been warned," she bellowed, raising the phone high like it was a sword of righteousness. "And now I'm calling the authorities." I opened my mouth, but Marla nudged my arm and gave me a look that said, "Let her dig her own hole." Brenda turned her phone outward so we could all hear the ringing. "Yes, I'm reporting a trespasser," she said with theatrical urgency. "A woman aggressive armed. Yes. She has a weapon in her hand." The weapon was, of course, the same green garden hose Marla had been using all week. Slightly kinked. Definitely not lethal. Unless you were a parched tulip. Marla calmly turned off the water and set the hose down like she was disarming a bomb. Meanwhile, Brenda was still on the call, voice rising in manufactured panic. "I'm at 212 Cherry Ridge Drive," she said. "Please hurry, I don't feel safe." Marla winked at me. Brenda, eyes full of panic, turned to me and hissed, "You might want to step back. She's clearly unstable." I didn't move, partly out of disbelief, partly because it was already too good to miss. 10 minutes later, 2 patrol cars rolled up. Brenda lit up like it was Christmas morning. "Finally," she whispered. "The law." She straightened her back. positioned herself like she was about to be interviewed on live television, and pointed toward Marla like she was naming her arch-nemesis. One of the officers, a tall guy maybe mid-30s, stepped out. His eyes scanned the yard. When they landed on Marla, something changed. "Marshal Givens," he said, sounding surprised. Marla gave a casual wave. "Hey, Deputy Lewis. How's your mom doing?" The younger officer standing beside the car blinked in confusion. Lewis turned and said, "She's federal. Off duty. But yeah." Brenda, not picking up on the massive shift in the room, shouted, "No. She's lying. She's been threatening me." With that, she pointed to the now limp garden hose. The two officers exchanged a look that said it all. Marla, completely unfazed, folded her arms. Brenda's face twisted, jaw twitching like a bad Wi-Fi signal. "There's got to be a mistake," Brenda stammered. "She's harassing the neighborhood. You can't let her get away with it just because she's got some shiny badge." Deputy Lewis cleared his throat, clearly trying not to laugh. "Ma'am, Marshal Givens is well known in this department. And as far as I can see, she's standing on her own lawn, watering flowers. You're just taking her side because she's part of the boys' club, huh?" Brenda barked. Marla chuckled. "Sweetheart, I've arrested more boys than I've ever clubbed." Brenda backed off for that day, but I could tell it wasn't over. She wasn't retreating. She was regrouping. The next morning, there was a hot pink envelope taped to Marla's mailbox. I opened it out of curiosity and nearly snorted cereal through my nose. It was a citation 6 violations, including unauthorized hose usage and excessive lawn ornamentation. Signed in loopy cursive, Brenda Calloway. Marla just folded it and slid it into the junk drawer next to old batteries and soy sauce packets. Then came Brenda's piece de resistance, the mailbox court. That afternoon, she set up a folding table near the community mailbox cluster, complete with printed forms and a Bluetooth speaker softly playing Mozart. A few neighbors gathered, more curious than concerned. Brenda stood behind the table like a tyrant librarian. "Due to repeated violations, we are holding a formal neighborhood mediation session." She gestured to a lawn chair. "The accused may present her defense." Marla, who was walking her schnauzer, stopped. "You want me to sit in your folding chair and explain my flower pots?" Brenda nodded like this was all perfectly normal. Marla looked at me, then at the dog. "Well, I didn't bring my lawyer, but I've got a witness who poops in public. Will that do?" The crowd snorted. Brenda scowled and began handing out flyers, grainy photos of Marla's yard with accusations like unauthorized stone placement and gnome intimidation. "This gnome is facing my window," Brenda snapped. "It's clearly an act of psychological aggression." "You think the gnome is threatening you?" Marla asked. "I know when I'm being watched." Marla turned to the neighbors. "If he testifies, do I get time off for good behavior?" Even the quietest folks were laughing now. Brenda's hold on the neighborhood was slipping, and she knew it. That night, things got weird. Marla's security camera picked up Brenda creeping through the yard after midnight, taking photos with her phone flashlight on. She tripped over a sprinkler, swore under her breath, then scurried off. Marla didn't even get up. She poured a glass of sweet tea and emailed the footage to her contacts. "Let her build her own case," she said. The next day, Marla hosted a casual coffee catch-up in the backyard. Neighbors started sharing their own Brenda horror stories finds for Halloween decorations. Notes about uncooperative wind chimes, passive-aggressive emails. By evening, the final match was struck. Brenda tried to file a formal complaint to the HO, except the HOA president, Hank Donnelly, happened to be an old friend of Marla's from her early days in law enforcement. He showed up, shook her hand, and thanked her for keeping the peace. I watched Brenda from the window as she paced her porch in rage, chewing the inside of her cheek like it owed her rent. That's when I knew she'd try calling the cops again. And she did. The next morning, she stood outside in full hair and makeup, pacing. By the time the first patrol car rolled in, she was already mid-sob, pointing toward Marla's porch like she just witnessed a heist. "She's dangerous," Brenda yelled. "She's been using her status to threaten and harass. I fear for my life." The officers didn't even get a word out before Marla walked out holding a tablet. "You'll want to see this," she said. She pulled up the security footage. Brenda wandering through the yard at 1 a.m., 3 a.m., even 5 a.m., mumbling to herself and taking photos from every angle. "You claim you stayed on the sidewalk?" Marla asked, pausing the video where Brenda was clearly knee-deep in the petunias. The senior officer sighed and muttered into his radio. Turns out Brenda already had 3 complaints on file, 2 for harassment, 1 for filing a false report. When she shouted, "I demand she be arrested," the officer raised his hand and said simply, "Ma'am, you're not the victim here." 10 minutes later, Brenda was in cuffs, stunned silent. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. Just a quiet click and a ride in the back of the patrol car. The neighborhood exhaled. Days later, Sheriff Lyle Dawson himself pulled up. He and Marla sat on the porch like old war buddies. They laughed. They caught up. He confirmed Brenda was facing court summons and the DA had seen the footage. Marla nodded like she already knew. That weekend, she hosted a barbecue. The whole neighborhood showed up, even the couple no one had seen in 5 years. People laughed, ate ribs, and toasted with lemonade. Brenda peeked from her window once but never came outside. Marla raised her sweet tea in her direction. Later, she handed me an envelope. "Drop this in her mailbox for me, would you?" Inside was an invoice. Itemized. Precise. Legal fees. Surveillance costs. Property damages. Signed in Marla's clean script. Payment requested by end of month, or we take it to civil court. At the next HOA meeting, Hank made it official. No resident may issue or distribute citations without board approval. Any attempt to do so would be considered harassment. Nobody said her name, but we all knew. A week later, I packed up my suitcase. As I buckled in, Marla handed me a sandwich and said, "Never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, but the pig likes it. Just build a fence and turn on the sprinklers." I didn't get it then, but now, I understand it perfectly.